Well, good evening, everyone. Happy Tuesday. My name is Tierney Ridley, and I have the privilege of serving as operations manager at Toward Pride. And we want to welcome you to a Bag Lady Put It Down, the weight and wisdom women carry. And so I don't know if all of you are aware, but we are now officially Toward Pride, formerly known as Pride in the Pews, and this is our first public event with our new name. So if you could give us some, emoji reactions in the chat, we would appreciate it. We are in a season of transition and celebration, and super excited about what this next season and chapter holds. Toward Pride equips institutions to advocate for the holistic health and wellness of Black LGBTQ plus communities. We envision a world where LGBTQ plus communities are embraced by social, civic, and faith-based institutions that insist on our freedom and full flourishing. And so tonight, in honor of Women's Health Month, we are creating space to do something radical, to set the bags down. I'm sure all of you are familiar with the song where Miss Badu told us to put it down, but she didn't exactly tell us how to do that. And so that's what we're here to explore together today, this evening, this afternoon for some of you, depending on what side of the world you're on. But that's what we want to talk about today. And so, as we get started in our conversation, we want to kind of ground ourselves, set our intentions, and make sure that we are coming into the space with shared vision, with shared goals, and kind of offering ourselves a moment to relax, relate, release before we get started. And so, to do that, I want to invite my colleague Autumn to lead us through a libation and a ritual.
What about now? Okay, green is go. Hey, y'all, it's an honor to be here. And I'm going to start with a libation. And I'll just read what I've written and ask you to ground yourself and participate as you feel led or so inclined. Somebody almost walked off with all our stuff. Not just the bags, not just the burdens, not just the labor folded like neat church programs and tucked beneath our tongues. I'm talking about our softness, our rest, our hormones, our laughter, discernment, and boundaries. Our names before they became job titles, our bodies became before they became battlegrounds. And tonight, before we begin, we call all of it back. So, if you can, put your feet on the floor. Roll your shoulders down, unclench your jaw, and release your stomach from performing strength. Take one deep breath for the girl you used to be, one for the woman you have become, and one for the true self that is still emerging. We open this digital space with intention, not as consumers, not as brands, not as productivity machines and cute earrings and lipstick, but as whole people, sacred people, sometimes tired yet brilliant people, people carrying too much for far too long. And as is our custom, we call the roll. This gathering is for the bag ladies, the backpack femmes, the tote carrying theologians, the eldest daughters, the youngest babies, the Black women who translated pain into professionalism, the women of color who learned how to survive rooms that never planned to hold them gently, the queer folks, the caretakers and community mothers, those who keep showing up with safety pin snacks, strategy, and some sort of sacred. As I pour, we call on the women who carried nations on tired hips. This is for Harriet, Sojourner, for Fanny, Ella, Septima, for Audrey, for Belle, for June, for Tony, Nikki, Asada, and all of the others. For the church mothers who hummed while grieving, for the grandmothers who stretched one pot into a miracle, for the women who stayed, and for the women who left, and even more for the women still trying to decide. We honor the healers, the therapists, the teachers, organizers, nurses, leaders, and artists. The soft femmes learning that tenderness is not weakness, the ones learning they do not have to carry everything alone. And of course, our non binary sibs learning to show up in a world that does not honor their fullness. Bag lady, you gonna hurt your bag. Not because you're weak, but because nobody taught you that survival and suffering are not the same thing. Nobody taught us how to put that bag down without feeling guilty. But tonight, if only for a moment, we rest without apology. We say no without shaking. We practice release together. Release what is not yours. Release what almost buried you. And keep the wisdom, keep the lesson, keep the receipts, keep your holy knowing, and keep the version of yourself that survived every impossible thing that you thought would break you. Water to the ancestors, light to the living, breath to the weary, honor to ourselves. Take a deep breath, release it, and together we close. Ashe.
Ashe, thank you, Autumn, so much for grounding us in our space. And can I just say that showing up not as productivity machines with cute earrings and lipsticks is going in my journal. Okay, that line right there did something to me. I was typing as soon as I was supposed to be breathing. Okay, so we appreciate you and your gift and all that you are, and for being in this space with us today. Um, so, before we move into the panel portion of our conversation this evening, I have the honor of introducing someone who will help ground us in this time through storytelling. And so I have her a bio here because, in true Black fashion, we want to give people their credentials and make sure you know exactly who is in the room and sharing with you in the space. So, I'm excited to welcome Sky Shepherd. Sky Shepherd is a gender justice advocate, photographer, and mother of two. Her work is grounded in a belief that care, storytelling, and community are essential to how we understand and advance gender equity. Alongside her professional work, Sky's creative practice as a photographer explores themes of cultural memory, healing, and everyday forms of resilience. She holds a Master of Social Work from Columbia University and a BA in Anthropology and Gender Studies from Bard College. So, will you virtually help me welcome Sky Shepherd to ground us in storytelling?
Thank you so much for that introduction. So I'm going to give a little information about me and my experience walking into caregiving, motherhood, and so on. Here we go. I was raised by caregivers, healers, and hustlers. The woman in my life knew how to survive and endure, but I rarely saw intentional rest. Rest felt like a luxury, and to my family, the circumstances surrounding their exhaustion, poverty, migration, feeling disposed by those in power, made it feel like rest would never be obtainable. There was always the need to work, there were the children, there was the community, there was being available to everyone else. The closest thing to rest I witnessed were small pauses, a novella break, long gossip filled phone calls, Mary J. Blige playing while the smell of pine sol moved through the house on a Sunday morning. Even as a child, I knew it wasn't enough because deep down, I knew that my mother, grandmothers, and aunties were never comfortable with pausing. They were never okay with solitude and silence unless they were talking to God. And in many ways, I romanticized their tenacity and grit to maintain a household, a job, and children, even with the chips stacked up against them. I couldn't tell you when the mechanism of succeeding, of doing something, of becoming someone became a part of how I moved in the world. But it was through witnessing the woman in front of me and the lack of care the world gave them that I never understood how to embody leisure. Even though the woman in my life may not have had the language to mention oppression, system inequities, and barriers, they knew something about having to work twice as hard. Being a high achiever was my response to witnessing these difficulties and my attempt to excel beyond my family's socioeconomic status. If I excelled, I was good. If I excelled, I was worthy. It felt almost natural to feel the highs of being an overachiever, and through seeking this, I became used to having high thresholds of pain. I wore my endurance like a badge of honor. I told my birth stories proudly. 3 days of labor with my first child, answering emails on the way to the hospital with my second. At the time, I thought that made me strong. Now I think it revealed how disconnected I was from my own limits. These experiences did not quite prepare me for motherhood. In fact, it underprepared me in my journey to becoming a mother of two. Because when you become a caregiver, especially for little ones, you must relinquish some kind of control. You have to be okay with not achieving all of the things at once and adjusting your expectations. I ended up learning that the hard way. One day last summer, I was carrying one child in the car seat, holding the other by the hand, trying to get us all out during a hot DC day. I was tired, likely dehydrated from the breastfeeding and the lack of sleep, and I had a pinch on my hip. The diaper bag unzipped, diapers, teething toys, wipes spilled across the sidewalk behind me, and the only response I had was starting to cry. Not because diapers are expensive, but because my body had been begging me to take it easy, to listen to it, and I refused to. These high anxious moments and responses were not one off moments. And even while I had an active partner, a village to provide support, and enough parental leave through my employer, things that should not be a luxury for caregivers, I cannot divorce myself from the idea that I was doing something wrong. Motherhood forced me to recognize that I had spent most of my life being rewarded for carrying things well, being dependable, productive, capable, the person who could hold everything together without dropping anything. And that rest and leisure may only come in the night when the kids were down or when I needed to talk to God. Motherhood actually exposed every place where I had confused performance with wellness and achievement, and where I confused success with doing it right. The reality is, the success of being a caregiver is putting yourself first by recognizing your limits, your needs, and knowing when you must stop. If you push yourself too hard, if you don't come back to your center, then it creates an imbalance within your home. You can think about that internally or externally. Mothers and caregivers are often the ecosystem for their children, so it is imperative that we have more moments to celebrate that we are regulated and rested versus checking off our, to-do list for the day. For Black folks, especially those of us who are high achievers, caring often becomes ingrained in our identity. We carry organizations, we carry our families, we carry our communities, we carry expectations, and while we are powerful and more than capable, I think it is time for us to recognize how powerful we are when we decide to put some of the bags down. Someone once told me that your body will make you pause before you do. Your body will show you the signs before you recognize when you reach your limits. So the questions I ask myself now to help with the overachieving syndrome and questions I give to you all is, what do I need in this season versus what can I accomplish in this season? Is this truly urgent, or can I wait until, or this can I wait until tomorrow? Is this something that can be outsourced? Who am I doing life with? Who in my village can support me today? Because mothering also should not happen alone. I am still learning that wellness is not something we earn after exhaustion. I am still processing that being cared for does not make me less capable. For Black mothers and caregivers, putting the bags down is not just for our survival. It is how we become softer, how we become better, how we come back to ourselves and to our humanness. It is also how we teach our children to survive. When we are supported, regulated, and rested, everyone around us will also flourish. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sky, for sharing a piece of your story and your testimony with us. Two of the things that you said that stood out to me the most were how we have a tendency to romanticize tenacity and grit, and how we confuse performance with wellness. And so if I perform well, if I perform that I am well, then people might just actually believe me. But that doesn't necessarily mean that I am well. And so thank you so much for grounding us and kind of giving us a little bit of insight into where we're going in this conversation. And so I want to talk a little bit about the themes that are going to come up here, right? So we're talking about leadership. Scott talked a lot about mothering. And I just want to name as a disclaimer that this conversation is for all women, right? So whatever your leadership looks like, whatever your motherhood looks like, whatever your caregiving looks like, however you show up for yourself and others in your personal life, in your work life, in all of those different varieties, and all the places and spaces that you get to occupy. This conversation is for all of us, no matter how we show up, no matter how we identify, no matter who's looking to us at the end of the day. This conversation is for each of us. And so I just want to make sure that as we talk about leadership and as we talk about mothering and as we talk about caregiving, even though you might hear us use some of those words, if there's a synonym or another experience that applies to your lived experience that allows you to see yourself situationally in these examples better, I want to invite you to reimagine that. I want to invite you to talk about that. So people are going to talk about their lived experiences. They're going to talk about their narratives. They're going to talk about their stories. But I don't want you to exclude yourself because they didn't exactly walk down your road as they would have said in my Black Baptist church growing up. Just because they wasn't exactly on your street or in your example, I don't want you to feel like these things don't apply to you. And so now we are going to transition into the panel portion of our conversation. And I want to offer an opportunity for the incredible folks that we are going to be in conversation with tonight to introduce themselves to us. So, in 90 seconds or less, tell us how you would want to introduce yourself. Now, the people like to say name, organization, role, da 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 da, however you want to introduce yourself, what you want the people to know about you in 90 seconds or less, and one hope you have for our conversation this evening. And so I see Asada first on my screen. So I'm going to toss it to you.
Thank you. Hey y'all, I'm Asada. Pronouns are she, her, and I am based in Africatown, Alabama, which I'm very proud of. I am a mama. I am also the executive director at Tending Futures, which is a Black and Indigenous wellness organization. And I think my hope for this conversation is that whereas we're saying all these things about rest and wellness, that like even throughout this process, that we're actually embodying it for ourselves.
Ashe. Thank you. Dr. Nick.
Hey y'all, I'm Dr. Nick. Y'all can call me Nick. My pronouns are they, them. I am based here in Chicago, originally from New York with roots in the West Indies. And the way that I show up to this work is as a cultural worker, creating safe spaces for queer folks along the gender spectrum. I do that in a multiple of ways. The most recent way I described it is from the therapy room to the dance floor. So by day, I'm a community-based psychologist, and then by night or day, depending on the on the day, I'm producing events and programs through a space called Party Noir, which again is just a space to lift up and affirm the lives of Black women across the gender spectrum. And I think my hope for this conversation is I'm thinking about Autumn's libation and the calling in of all of those wonderful, great Black feminists and women whose lineage we're doing this work inside of. And so just to remember, yeah, we remember where we're coming from and remember that like our work is already grounded and rooted in a lineage that came before us.
Awesome. Thank you. Viola.
Hello, can y'all hear me? Yeah, okay, great. So hello everybody, my name is Bila Osweke, pronoun she, her. I live in Philadelphia. I'm from Houston, Texas, and I'm also Nigerian, so important to name all those things. I am the executive director of New Voices for Reproductive Justice. We do work across Ohio and Pennsylvania, and I enter movement work through as a communications director, so appreciative for all the narrative and intentionality there. In addition to, like Dr. Nick, I have double lives too, or however you phrase that. So, in addition to the New Voices and reproductive justice work I do, I'm also a coach. I used to coach girls basketball high school for 8 years, and I now offer like mental health support to various high schools across the city. And a hope for myself is that I can learn. You can never stop unlearning and learning important ways to care for yourself. So I'm looking forward to hearing what Asada and Dr. Nick have to offer, as well as tidbits from you, Tierney.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to this conversation even more and more. All right. So, opening question. When we think about putting the bags down and what it means to put the bags down, we all have acknowledged that that did not necessarily come with an instruction manual. It was just something that was like talked out there and like, okay, figure out how to do it, right? And so when you think about the bags that women in leadership carry, what are the ones that you think we talk about the least? the ones that get forgotten, the ones that always aren't at the forefront of people's minds. Um, and so I don't want to necessarily put anybody on the spot. So if someone has an answer they're ready to share, that would be great. If not, I can popcorn it and we can do it that way. But if anything comes up for anyone specific who would like to go first.
I can start. I think for Black and Indigenous women specifically, like there's this bag of how we're being perceived. And so we're constantly having to negotiate like how much emotion is acceptable, like how much softness is safe, or how much exhaustion that like we're even allowed to show before people start questioning our leadership entirely. And then I also think while like carrying all of that, we're while navigating all of that, we're also carrying grief. And I think so many of us are actively leading while we're actively grieving. And so whether it's like grieving relationships or communities or even just the things that we've had to like abandon just to survive. And because we're still functioning, nobody recognizes that even as grief.
Yeah. Thinking about the bag of other people's perceptions. So how you're perceived when you walk in a room, when you enter the Zoom room, when you step on any of the scenes, and then also thinking about the ways that we carry grief alongside us. One of my colleagues talks about grief as a companion, and so it's like sometimes we always just think about these big griefs or the losses that people can see. But there are all of these smaller and more micro griefs that we navigate as well. Unspoken expectations, not necessarily being where it is that you thought you would be, not necessarily having what it is you thought you would have, and having to start over and pivot, and all of these like micro things that come along with being in leadership and with just being human, and how that affects the way that you show up. But yes, thank you so much. Um,
I can offer a thought. So Tierney, when you talk about like the micro impact, I think about I don't know, idiom phrase, death by a thousand cuts. And it also makes me think this is like an academic term. I don't know the person that came up with it, but the idea of weathering, which is like it's not like one hit alone, but it's like compounded hits that you sustain. And so when you think about, being women or femmes, Black, Indigenous, queer, there's all these like microaggressions that are normalized within society, even by people that say that they love us, and even by people that do believe that they love us. Some of my deepest pains as a leader have actually come from other Black women whose expectations are just wild. Wild, right? And speaking of expectations, it feels oftentimes, sorry, I talk about Black people, so I'm talking about Black and brown, but I'm talking about Black people right now. There are such heightened expectations of Black women leaders that far exceed white counterparts and male counterparts. But society would have us believe that it's men and white folks that are inherent leaders. And so there's this spitting of the face, perpetual spitting of the face that Black women in leadership have to endure. And when I say leadership, I'm not just talking about organizations or formal roles. Black women are oftentimes the informal leaders and backbones of our communities, our families, institutions, with little to no credit. So I think about that, like on top of that, just being a truth that a lot of us have to navigate. It is a deep insult because to the point that we're all lifting up, we continue operating, we continue going. With that being said, also think about the shift from being a hero to a scapegoat, right? So you're there saving everybody, healing everybody, extending yourself, bleeding out. And then when you don't meet everybody's every single need and request, right? Not considering your humanity, you then become an easy person for people to shit on, honestly. And it's really, really hurtful and harmful. So I think to Asada's point, there's like the physical stress, the mental, but I think the emotional and spiritual injuries that Black women in leadership endure are not talked about often enough.
yes, thank you for sharing. And it reminds me of the concept of having to, work twice as hard to get half as far. And it's like, so even when I do work twice as hard to get half as far, now you have unrealistic expectations of what even going the furthest looks like. And so, how do you navigate other people's expectations while also caring for yourself and making sure that just because they have unrealistic expectations, you don't harm yourself further by trying to actually achieve them and say, no, that's unrealistic. No, I'm not going to do that. No is a full sentence, and I'm going to utilize it more often than not. So giving ourselves permission to say no, as we're navigating all of those things. Thank you, Dr. Nick. Anything to share for this question?
Yeah, I'll add just a little bit. Beulah's both of you y'all's contributions made me think of the sort of experience of pet to threat. So coming into the space as a Black femme, Black woman, and at first sort of being doted on, being invited into the space because you might have some the energy, the sauce, the energy that you kind of bring into the work, and when Asada was speaking to some of the ways that like the perception of others and how that might sort of like start to sort of to start to strain you. I think that yeah, just first being seen as this energy that's being invited into this space, and whether or not it's because you are being able to sort of like advocate for yourself or advocate for the people around you, advocate for your the people that you're working with, um, or just being an outspoken person in the room, speaking up, and then that sort of perception shifting from you being a pet or someone that we can be a relationship to then now being seen as a threat in the space. And yeah, I think it's I think this is one of the just thinking about sort of like within leadership and women, Black women or Black femmes in sort of like corporate spaces, and yeah, just the trajectory that happens after you've been invited into a space, and what happens as perception is as people are putting their perceptions onto you.
Yes, I just learned about this from Pet to Threat thing today. I was reading a Substack article, and I was like, it was just like, like a light bulb moment because it's like,
Right.
of course, you love the new energy in the room and the new ideas until I actually understand how everything works here. And now I still got new energy and new ideas, but now I'm a little too loud, and it's going
And
up
that
and
exactly.
pushing against the things and the status quo and how they've always been done. And carrying all of that weight and noticing the shifts from when you were the pet to now you are the threat, and people telling you, well, that's not happening. That's not
Right.
what's actually occurring here. And so navigating the emotional labor, figuring out how to show up in those spaces and still want to do your best work and put your best foot forward while also realizing that how people engage you is different.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I want to transition into some of our targeted or more specific questions. And so I'll ask a question for a specific individual. And after they respond, I want to invite anyone else on the panel to add to, contribute to, or answer the question themselves. Um, so Asada, this one's going to be for you. So attending futures centers care for the whole person. In your work, what do you see showing up in the bodies of women and femmes in leadership? And what does the body know that the mind hasn't quite caught up to yet?
There's so much inflammation. Like inflammation, autoimmune disease, like chronic fatigue. Like it's almost as if like our nervous systems have forgotten what safety actually feels like. And I think for women whose bodies are like essentially begging them to stop negotiating with survival mode, like we're constantly like in that. And as it was kind of mentioned like earlier, that the body often knows long before the mind admits it. So your body knows when something is like unsustainable. Like it knows when a relationship or institution or leadership model is actually harming us, even when our mind is still trying to justify like enduring it. And so I think a lot of women are taught, like we're unfortunately taught to distrust our bodies and to override those instincts in order to keep producing. But like eventually the body speaks louder. It always does.
Yes, I've seen a lot of people more recently talk about inflammation, and how I was listening to somebody and did it was like, how you turn a subject into an Instagram video and you don't know exactly where it started, but now it lives in all these multiple places. So it was one of those. And they're basically talking about how when we don't release our emotions or release our anger, or any other feeling that can turn inward on ourselves. And so they've done a study about Black women and the rise of fibroids, and how sometimes when you have all the anger and you turn it inwards, it's like, well, I don't remember 20 years ago all these Black women having all these fibroids. Well, one, y'all probably wasn't researching them. So some more people than you didn't know had fibroids, but also the way that we've been taught to internalize our anger and, fix your face in your meeting and make sure that you're, presenting respectability and all of these other things, and how they're having long lasting effects on our bodies. And even once we get to the point where we realize what's happening, we can't undo what we've already done, even as we continue to try to move forward. And so thinking about how we can be proactive as opposed to reactive when we learn how all of those emotions and stress and carrying too many bags can have an effect on you physically, as well as mentally, spiritually, mentally, and emotionally. Any other thoughts, reactions, reflections? All right. So the next one, Beulah, I'm going to toss to you. Restorative justice is often applied outward towards communities and conflict. How do you apply a restorative lens inward for women doing this work? So we just talked a lot about what happens and what comes up and what can be inflamed. So as we're thinking about restorative practices for the awakening and the enlightenment of those realities, what comes to mind?
Yeah, I think Black women in particular Black women and femmes have to be very intentional about not becoming martyrs. I think that society and our communities glorify us, again, bleeding out. And so in our adulthood and as we go further in our leadership, we conflate success with like sacrifice, and sometimes sacrifice to no end. And it's a grave disservice to us because we are part of the collective. We're in the communities that we serve. One of the things that I tell my team is in order to transform our communities, we must first transform ourselves. Also think about, I don't know if this is a quote, I'll be stealing stuff, passages, I don't know. So Autumn, thank you again for citing the weathering thing. I'm like, where did I hear this from? I don't know. But the sentiment that a poisonous tree cannot bear good fruit, right? And so I think because we're doing this work within a capitalistic system, we begin to like borrow some of the ideas of capitalism, right, in order to function, because oftentimes it feels like we're swimming upstream. But we cannot do good work if we're not investing in ourselves, caring for ourselves. Um, our service actually becomes quite hypocritical if we're serving community and not serving ourselves. So I had a therapist that offered a really good frame. It was hard for me to think about my needs and what I needed when she asked me that. I felt like she was asking me trigonometry. I'm like, what is this person talking about? What do I need? What do you mean? And so she offered me a reframe and she was like, well, if you can't think about what this current Beulah needs, what did you need as a child? Right. And she helped me kind of like realize I'm an integrated self, but also if I can't service myself right now because I've been conditioned to not think about my needs, what did I need as a kid? And I had to hold back tears because it was such a simple yet relieving question. And so that's what I think about when I think about how Black women and femmes are conditioned to service community and divorce ourselves from the very same community that we're looking to service. Um, at the end of the day, if we're not mindful, we're going to pass along the same tiresome, life threatening practices to future generations. And that's just not anything that's sustainable. And we go through what we go through so that future generations don't. So that's what I would say. Like we cannot restore our communities if we don't see ourselves as part of communities and if we don't also tend to our own wounds.
Yes, seeing ourselves as a part of the community, doing doing things that would benefit us, as seeing ourselves as a part of the us that we are benefiting. You mentioned things that you coming up with things that you like to do in your childhood, and one of the things that I've realized is sometimes when you feel overwhelmed, if you think back to your childhood self and the things that you enjoyed doing when you were a child, they still work. So, if you enjoy reading a good book, whatever your genre is as a child, go escape into another world. If you enjoy coloring, whether, it might have been chalk on the sidewalk back then, but you could get one of those adult coloring books now and, kind of give yourself a timer to zone out and do the things. But if you go back and think about some of those childhood practices that brought you joy and gave you life, figuring out how to incorporate some of those into your rhythms as building restorative practices. So not just waiting until you get to the point of feeling like you're burnt out or overwhelmed or stressed, but how do you build those things into your rhythms, into your systems, into your everyday life?
Yeah, and I also think about restorative justice as preventative, right? Oftentimes, when another person is gunned down, we say justice would have been this never happened. So when it comes to us, I understand the analogy of, you can't pour from an empty cup, but what if the cup should just be? What if there's no, we didn't need to pour, you just need to exist. And so that's something else I want to offer. Like sometimes restoration is prevention from even needing restoration and just being. And then to Asada's point about our nervous systems forget what safety is, we've been conditioned to believe that rest is a disservice to our potential, right? When like rest is a part of the human condition. So just want to offer that as well.
Dr. Nick, I'm going to toss the next one to you. Thinking about the work that you do around radical resilience. So the word resilience can sometimes feel like another way of telling people to keep going when they really need to stop. So how do you define radical resilience and how is it different from just survive?
Yeah. So for me, I think that I come with the understanding that the word resilience, when you think about how it's used in dominant culture, it can sound like productivity. Like you said, it can sound like pushing through. It can sound like disregarding this full body, this full spirit, this full mind, and just kind of keep pushing, keep moving forward. And I think that framing invites people to forget that, to forget themselves, forget their bodies, and inviting folks to do the most labor in the worst of conditions. And I think that for me, it's sort of like a redefinition of the word or turning the word on its head or thinking about the multiplicity of what resilience can actually look and feel like. And in my practice, I think it's about sort of treating recovery as the work itself, inviting like a sense of slowness when you're doing sort of care work, doing this work. And I think it's also inviting that same body, that same mind, that same spirit to metabolize what it is that we're carrying before we're asking to carry more. And I think that's the difference. The difference here is really thinking about sort of recovery as the work, and yeah, that this body actually gets a say rather than sort of being told to just kind of push through and power through.
And I get a say in what continuing looks like, not just pushing through and powering through for the greater good or for the benefit of someone else or to the service of somebody else's most important thing. What does it look like for me to keep going for my most important thing? Because I am my most important thing. So what
I
does it look
am my
like for
most
me to
important thing.
what does it look like for me to keep doing or to do when I don't feel like doing if it's specifically just for me?
Mhm.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Um, any other thoughts or reflections as you think about radical resilience? Has anyone here reclaimed the word radical, or radical resilience? Has anyone tossed the word resilience away? Do we have any mixed feelings about like what it looks like to incorporate that into our lexicon?
I've definitely tossed the word resilience away just because of the implication, but I'm interested in what Asada thinks.
No, I was agreeing. It was actually similar to something that you had said earlier. Like, first off, I think that like survival and resilience are often confused because as oppressed people, we've become very skilled at like just enduring. And so like we don't understand that endurance alone is not liberation. And so if you like you were saying on the last question about like just existing and just being, like what does that like actually look like? I mean, because I think we all know a lot of people or have been that person at some point in time where like we survived something, but we're not actually alive. Like we just survived it. And I think a future that is actually like worth fighting for shouldn't like it should include our ability to actually live inside of it and not just endure.
Right. And like one of the reasons I love Toward Pride and also love Faith Matters Network is I remember when I was a kid, I would be in church and the pastor would say something. I'm like, what? And I didn't feel like I could ask questions, but here I'm like, we can ask questions and interrogate. And so I've always been curious. And so when I first heard the phrase, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, I'm like, yeah. But then as a kid, I'm like, but if I get hit by a bus, am I stronger? Like what? And so I think that there are certain colloquials or whatever they're called, idioms or whatever that mean well, and I understand the sentiment. But when you combine that with like the harshness and cruelty of capitalism, white supremacy, and patriarchy, and then our experiences within our various identities, it actually is quite insidious what these very casual phrases are suggesting. So for me, a lot of times when I understand people to say like resilience, what I'm hearing is a celebration of fortitude and tenacity, because resilience puts the onus of responsibility on the individual or groups navigating it, as opposed to interrogating why do we have to be resilient in the first place.
And yes, we got some Faith Matters Network in the chat. So shout out to y'all for the shameless plug. And I want to invite here also just naming the difference in perspective, right? And so nobody's perspective is right, nobody's perspective is wrong. How you get to putting your bags down, how do you get to your freedom, how you get to figuring out what works for you doesn't have to look like it doesn't have to be monolithic. It doesn't have to look like exactly what your neighbor did to get there. You don't have to reclaim or own or use the same words. This is all collective and community work, and we can be in community together even if the exact same things don't work for all of us, right? So it's like, what does it look like for you to find your own place to put your bags down, and your own place and way to embody that freedom, and to put down some of that weight that you're carrying, and so put your shoulders down every once in a while. The way we get there doesn't all have to look the same, but the point is that we're all on a journey there together. So I'm going to pause right here and take a quick commercial break and invite you to partner with Toward Pride. We are really excited about these webinars that we're offering. This is our second webinar of the year, and the first under our new name. And we are able to offer these at no cost because of our generous donors and because of the people who support the work that we are doing here at Toward Pride. And so I want to invite you to become one of our generous donors, whether that be through your time, whether that be through your money, whether that be through your connections, whether that be through your resources, whatever it is that you have to offer. We want to be in partnership with you. We want to be in relationship with you. We want to continue to build community together. And so if you would like to consider becoming a recurring monthly donor, we really, really need recurring donors so that we can be financially sustainable and financially responsible. One-time gifts are amazing, but if you could give a smaller recurring gift as opposed to a larger one-time gift, that would actually be amazing, because it helps us plan our budget. It helps us reach sustainability and set future goals and financial goals. And so that link is in the chat. If you would like to support and partner with us through your finances. If you would like to partner with us in any other ways, you can reach out to us via email. general@towardpride.org is where all of our general inquiries go. So if you have connections, partnerships, opportunities that you think would be a good fit for us, we would love to receive those as well. And so thank you for listening to my commercial break and my shameless plug. We really appreciate you being here and want to be able to continue this work and to continue to offer these types of experiences. And that is made possible by your generous donations and contributions. And so we are going to do another round of questions, and then we're going to open it up for Q&A closer towards the end of our conversation. So if you do have any questions that you would like to ask our panelists, or that you would like to ask Sky is going to come back with us for the Q&A portion of our conversation. Feel free to use the Q&A feature. If you go down to the bottom of your Zoom, depending on how big your screen is, you might have to click those three dots and then click on the part that says Q&A. We would love to receive your questions there. All right. And so this is a question I'll toss to everyone. We oftentimes use the word wellness a lot and don't necessarily define what we mean. So we could talk about physical wellness, mental wellness, emotional wellness, spiritual wellness. Personally, which dimension do you think is most neglected for women and femmes in leadership and why? So we think about physical wellness, mental wellness, emotional wellness, and spiritual wellness. Which one do you think gets laid by the wayside the most? I see the thoughts percolating. I see everybody's eyebrows are raising and just reaching for the unmute button.
I mean, I can offer a thought. I'm trying to reduce the takeover spirit because this is just I love this conversation of Black women being well. I would mention one that wasn't in the question, financial wellness, right? Because you if you cannot provide for yourself and your family, if you're having to work multiple jobs just to get by, it is so difficult to tend to yourself adequately. And I think like a lot of times in movement work, I just shared this last week at a convening I was at. Oftentimes we're missing a class analysis. Um, when I think about the ways that white women have bastardized well-being, many of them are middle class and can focus on their well-being. A lot of black and brown folks, women, femmes, queer folks, you have to have a baseline that you're operating from. So when I say financial wellness, I think that's like an umbrella for like just making sure people's material resources are met. Because only then can you really focus on, I believe, can you really focus on spiritual, mental, physical, to Sada's point earlier, but like while feeling safe. Because otherwise those things might feel like a distraction. And even though those of us on this call, whether we're panelists or in the chat, recognize the essential nature of caring for those intangibles, I cannot stress enough how many well-meaning people I have met that cognitively know this, but they're going to stress themselves out to make sure that their kids can eat. So I just want to, you just offered a beautiful, shameless plug and commercial. I want to offer a plug and commercial for mutual aid, right? Before we like pray for somebody or send them thoughts and prayers and wish them well, donate, right? Give them money because this climate in this economy is quite challenging. And to tell someone like focus on your mental health when they're hungry, it oftentimes doesn't land the way that we intend.
That is a great call out because you like you said, I'm not worried about my physical health, my mental health, my emotional health, or my spiritual health if my account is overdrawn, if my bills are due, and everything that keeps coming in my mail is red and urgent and about to be cut off. And so I think that often gets overlooked. It even got overlooked in our question. And so I think that's a perfect call out. Any other thoughts, reactions, reflections?
Well, now I feel like mine is the second most neglected because I do agree. Financial, because I think, because I was going to say embodiment, but I don't think that can actually happen if you don't have your material needs met. The reason I was thinking embodiment is because I feel we've learned how to intellectualize wellness without actually living it, like inside of our bodies. And especially for like women in leadership, we can tell you our political analysis, our 5-year goals, but like we can't tell you the last time we rested, before our body actually forced us to. And so we're often like just override like hunger, pain, exhaustion, like all of that, because leadership spaces often reward disconnection from the body. So I think especially like in organizing and like movement spaces, there could be this belief that urgency is more important than our actual humanity. But like the body keeps score, whether we acknowledge it or not, as I mentioned like earlier. So I think that embodiment is really important, but we can't have that without our like material needs being met.
And that makes me think about moving from theory to practice. It's like I can read all the books, I can know all of the things, I can intellectualize my way to putting all these bags down. But if I don't actually make the first intentional step to practice those things, I'm just talking a good game. I'm just writing a good Substack. I'm just, I got a fire sound bite to post on the Instagrams and go, go viral and all of the things. But I have to be able to move from theory and what I know in my head to practice and what I'm actually doing in my body. And sometimes just even feeling like we have permission to care for ourselves or permission to put the bags down is the first stumbling block. It's like all these other people deserve all these other things. And I want to make sure all these other people have all of these other things. But you are part of the other people. You deserve all the things. Um, so yeah, thank you. Dr. Nick, anything to add here before we push forward a little further? You good? Okay, awesome, awesome. And so I will toss the first question of this round to you. If you could give women and femmes in leadership one permission slip this evening, one thing to release, reclaim, or begin, what would it be?
I love this question so much. And you mentioned your friend recently offering you or gifting you the language of grief as a companion. And I think most recently I've been sitting and holding a lot of sort of like personal grief, collective grief, a lot working with a lot of grief with the people that I'm working with currently. And I think my permission slip would be around permission to end something on purpose, permission to stop watering a thing that's no longer living, permission to honor our dead, whether it's our dead previous versions of ourselves, previous versions of work we've done that might no longer be like feeding us or nourishing us. I think that most people that I work with, they know where to begin, they know where to start. But I think what a skill set that I think Black femmes and Black women might that I see we might struggle with is knowing when to lay a thing to rest, knowing when to say that this thing is no longer working for maybe us in the work that we're doing, working for me as a person, and I think that my permission slip here is to lay a thing down, to lay a thing to rest, and to no longer continue to show up for whether it's the work or a practice that's no longer feeding us. I think it is okay for us to bury a thing that has died, whether it's a previous version of ourselves or a previous version, like I said, of our work. And yeah, just continuing to be in a practice of no longer watering a thing that is no longer living for us. And I don't think we need anyone's agreement. You definitely don't even need my permission. But I do think that as we're thinking about sort of like living through what, like you said, the million little griefs. It's not just the sort of like losses that we can see, but it's the daily things that are either changing, that are transforming, that are turning over, that are composting. I think that we can. I think I want to offer the permission to lay a thing to rest. Um,
That's so good. Oh, that's so good. Because that doesn't mean you failed. That means it served its purpose. That means that season is over. It just means it's
right,
time for you to do something else or not. You just don't need to be
right.
doing that anymore. Um, and I would just to add to that, invite people to expand what they apply it to, right? Apply it to their relationship, apply it to personal, romantic, platonic, whatever type of relationship it is. And so, we think about laying to rest past versions of ourselves, the work that we do, the work that we always thought we would want to do, this career goal that you always thought you would want to do. If you don't want to fight the academic people and all of the institutions and all the things,
hmm
you can lay that goal to rest. If you and that never Negro or whatever they are don't need to be together no more, you can lay that to rest too. And if that friend don't never call to check on you and you always text them first, you can get rid of them as well. So it's so many ways. It's so many ways that we could apply giving ourselves permission to lay things down. And I know that sometimes for me, my stumbling block is feeling like I failed. And I mean, sometimes failing is okay, but even if you don't want to look at it as a failure, sometimes it's just okay for a thing to end. So that was good. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Um, Asada, I'm gonna toss this next question for you. So if you think about faith spaces, civic organizations, nonprofit organizations, all of these different types of institutions, what do you think it would look like for them to take physical health, to take the physical health of their women and female leaders serious?
I think it would look like building cultures where women don't have to care, like they don't have to earn care like through collapse. So going back to what Vila said originally about material needs, like financially, like because adequate pay, healthcare access, sabbaticals, I think childcare support is very important. Because I feel like we're, especially as women, too often push this narrative about the home life and the importance and also working, but these places aren't providing an environment that is fit for us to like do that. I think there needs to be realistic workloads and leadership structures that don't depend on one woman carrying everything silently. It also means like changing even the emotional culture of institutions. So women shouldn't have to prove dedication through self-neglect. And I felt like very called out by Dr. Nick's like response earlier about like letting things die, because I think that ties into this as well. Like I am personally learning of what it actually looks like to not have to like earn my care, and also to not feel that I have to just continuously give to something, and that like being constantly needed is not the same thing as being valued. And I feel that like too often in these spaces, like women are taught that.
Being constantly needed is not the same thing as being valued. We'll just drop a pin right there. Put that on a t-shirt, a journal, a sticky note, or something. Um, yes, Ashe, thank you. Um, and then Beulah, I'll toss this last question to you before we open it up for Q&A and see what questions our audience has. For women and femmes who have been strong for everyone around them and don't quite know how to receive care, what would you offer them this evening for someone this?
Sorry, that was definitely a bar. Like y'all need to send out an email with all the quotables. I'm overwhelmed. Um, can you read the question? I'm so
Yeah.
sorry.
No, 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 that's great. For women and femmes who have been strong for everyone around them and don't know how to receive care for themselves, what would you offer them tonight?
Yeah, okay, I appreciate that. I think that assessing yourself and admitting that you need to be cared for is an extremely vulnerable act. It's vulnerable because you're essentially subjecting yourself to people either saying, yes, I got you, or no, right? And being told no, particularly when you're giving and giving and giving, is very painful. And so I think before we can get into the external interpersonal act of expecting or trusting other people to care for us, we have to care for ourselves in ways that feel kind of like cheesy, and kind of like a Barney episode, but it's so critical. And I also think that conditioning to view caring for ourselves as cheesy is a byproduct and function of capitalism, right? I'm coming at capitalism's neck today. So I think before we can stand on a foundation and engage other people and prepare ourselves to potentially be disappointed, because that was going to be my answer to the question you asked Dr. Nick, like permission to disappoint people, especially if we're talking to queer folks, right? Permission to be like, hey, this is me. You had your life. I'm going to live mine. But yeah, I think in order for us to trust other people being able to hold and care for us, we have to adequately, comprehensively hold and care for ourselves. And I would just advise people to start that foundation, or if you already have one, to strengthen it, because being a leaders across the board are seen as infallible. And when we do make a mistake, again, all of the like the mob mentality comes out. Now compound that with blackness, womanness, queerness, if you're fat, right? If you're all these identities, formerly incarcerated, right? And so there's all these justifications for why black women leaders should not be seen as humans. So we have to, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So that means that much more we have to shield and support ourselves without seeking it in other before seeking it in other people.
Yes, turning it in introspective. And I like that you named it as like sometimes feeling like cheesy and corny because sometimes when we go back to the basics and do those rituals and those processes and those things for ourselves, it's like this feels lame, this feels corny, this doesn't feel natural. And it's like push past that initial discomfort, push past that initial this feels childlike feeling. And then on the other side of it, you realize, oh wait, okay, I feel better now. Oh, okay. I feel like I made progress. I feel like I'm doing something for myself. And so I really appreciate you naming that. Sometimes it might feel a little sticky or it might feel a little uncomfortable. And that's okay. It's okay to do things that feel a little silly, to see what happens on the other side.
100%.
So one, just want to say thank you so much for all of your thoughtful engagement, for all the questions. This has been a very enlightening conversation so far. I have a couple questions in the chat and in the Q&A that I want to offer up. And if you have any additional questions for the people who are here in the audience, or if you all have any questions you want to ask each other, we can get to that too. So the one of the questions here, um, and so we want to give a content warning for gun violence and loss of life. I'm sitting here with my friend. She is a single mother with her daughter and just recently lost her son to gun violence. She's looking for resources to help her in her situation. What advice or what, if any, advice would you have to give her?
I feel like, and I just stopped myself because I was about to say, I know this sounds cheesy, but like we just like went through this. It's not cheesy, but like it is, I feel like such a cliche response sometimes, but like how we've been talking about giving yourself permission. Like I think this is again one of those situations where like experiencing something like of that magnitude, like you don't have to earn like the way you're feeling right now. So like being angry, sad, stressed out, or whatever, like first off, like allowing yourself to like feel that, and then also allowing yourself to receive like exactly what the support is that you need, and not being afraid to like ask community specifically like for that.
Yeah, and I think I just want to offer a sense of just gratitude for sharing and holding space for your loss. And I think what Asada just said in terms of leading into your most immediate community. And I think that oftentimes it can be really challenging to name specific needs. So I would like to challenge friend that asked, as well as community members around, to say what kinds of support you can offer to a person who is moving through loss, who's moving through grief. Because I think it's really hard for us at times to be able to say, like, here are the specific ways that I need to be held, or here are the specific ways that I need to be supported. And I think that as a friend, you might be able to say, like, actually, this week I can support you with childcare. This week I can support you with meals. This week I can support you with driving you to sort of like work through whatever things might need to be worked through at this moment in time for you. So I think that, yeah, just opening up yourself to receive support from community, but then also asking and inviting community to name specifically how you can show up in this moment.
Thank you, and thank you for the invitation. Because sometimes when we're in community, we say, "Well, what do you need?" And sometimes it's like, "Well, I don't know what I need. I just need you to help me figure out what I need." And so it's like figuring out a way to show up for that person. Appreciate it.
Right.
And they said,
Because if
"Thank
I
you."
knew what I needed, I might have asked for it. Which, if you could tell me, if you can provide me with a menu, that makes the decision and the choice so much easier, especially as you're moving through such a deep loss.
Yes, yes. And so we are almost at time. And so I want to transition us into some final words. So as you think about the conversation that we've been able to have today, as you think about the hope that you shared for us at the beginning and where people might be leaving and going and open thoughts and questions they might have as they leave this space, I would like to invite each of you to offer a final word before we turn it over to do our closing and benediction. And Sky, I want to invite you back to offer a final word as well, if you are still available and with us. And so the order that I see you on my screen is Asada, Dr. Nick, Sky, and Beulah. And so if you would offer your final words in that order, I would greatly appreciate
Um, I think that especially like as women, well, I guess like the main thing is that I want to remind every woman that like you're not meant to carry the world alone. And like it seems so basic and so simple, but I think we really have been conditioned to believe that. And many of us have become so skilled at surviving that people mistake our capacity for consent. And so they see us carrying this like impossible weight and they assume that we're fine. And because we are women, and so we make it look graceful. But grace is not the absence of pain, and strength is not the absence of, I mean, and strength is not the absence of exhaustion. And so I think many of us are tired in ways that sleep alone can't fix. And so my hope is that tonight that this doesn't just inspire us to keep going harder, that I hope it reminds us that like we deserve softness too, and that like we deserve community and we deserve care and joy and rest, and not as rewards, but like our actual like birthrights. Um, because I feel like the goal should never be for women to carry this like infinite amount of pain. Like the goal should be for us to like build our lives and our families and our organizations and our movements where we no longer have to. And so yeah, just thank you for allowing me to share this space with y'all tonight. And I pray that like every woman here like leaves carrying like a little less alone.
And I think I would like to offer up that care work is not intended to be sort of like individual work. And I think we, as Black folks, as spiritual folks, as I know my folks from the West Indies, we understand that care work is really collective work. And I'm thinking about sort of that sense that Beulah spoke to earlier about the invitation to martyrdom, specifically for Black women in leadership, Black femmes in leadership. You're not intended to care for yourself, for your communities, for the work that you do in isolation. And in fact, I think the work is best supported, is best lived out, is best embodied when we're doing it as a collective practice, as collective work. And I think I also, because of Autumn's invocation of Black feminists, I want to bring in the words of Audre Lorde. Caring for myself is not self-indulgence, it is self-preservation. And that is an act of political warfare. And so just remembering that caring for ourselves is not self-indulgence, it is an act of self-preservation and it is literally a political act. Hence why we're being sort of, invited to sort of not do that work. And I think it's essential as we are living and moving through some treacherous and serious times. Thank y'all.
I believe I was next. I just have to say I've been listening. I've been here, and I wanted to react so many different times with emojis and stuff, but I was like, I have to chill because y'all have been giving me life. I think what I'll leave with, and something that's been coming to mind for me, is that we often hear a lot about it takes a village to raise a child, but I genuinely feel like it takes a village to raise a parent, to raise a mother. And I think it's echoing a lot about, collaborative care, and you really cannot do this work alone. I feel like it comes from two different aspects, though. You have to be willing and be vulnerable to speak out loud the things that you need. And I think oftentimes, especially with folks who are in leadership positions who are doing a lot of caregiving, it's hard to vocalize like when we need support. And I think the other thing is that sometimes it's hard for us to be seen, right? So when I was talking earlier about who's a part of my village. It's literally like, who's the person that I can vent to? Who's the person that can take these kids for 2 hours? Who's the person that I might want to go out and drink with a little bit? Like I have to have someone for everything. And I realized that a part of me being a more present and I don't want to say the word resiliency, almost slipped my head, but more present um, and restored parent is making sure that I have other folks to lean on. So I'm going to leave that word there.
I think I'm last. All right. I want to invite people to not give a crap, honestly. I keep hearing that when women turn 40, like they stop giving as much of a crap about all that. And I'm a little bit ahead of the schedule, I guess, because like I wear hoodies because it makes me feel comfortable. A lot of times I have to refine what I'm saying so I don't be too edgy. And I think about how, James Baldwin talks about the world being engineered for our death. And I think about how a lot of unsustainable expectations are baked within professionalism and perfectionism. And we have to interrogate and confront those things. I actually don't have that big of an issue with the word resilience, okay, Dr. Nick. So I'm cool with resilience. I'm good with it. But it's also like we should interrogate, grasp, and struggle with these things that we are just conditioned to accept, especially Black women and femmes, because it doesn't make any sense. So I would just invite people to begin interrogating or questioning what doesn't serve you, what doesn't serve us. And coupled with the unlearning is the opportunity to then learn what does make me feel fulfilled. And it will make you feel squeamish. It will make you feel uncertain at the beginning because it's new, right? If you're lifting weights, you've never done it before, you got to start off with maybe 5 pounds, 2 pounds. But if it's sustained practice, it becomes part of like your nature, which is much more life-giving than a lot of the realities that we're currently navigating.
Ashe, ashe, ashe to all that has been said. Um, I hope that something that has been shared today has added to your toolkit for putting the bags down, right? It's not a one size fits all, it's not a catch all, it's not going to happen overnight. But I hope that something that has been said will jog your memory when you think about picking up one more bag or too many more bags, or the next time you be like, I should actually put this down. I'm going to give myself permission to end this thing well. I hope that something that was said in our conversation today resonates with you, sticks with you, and lingers a while. And so, as a final and closing invitation, one for those of you who might not be aware, we mentioned at the beginning, and I just want to name it at the end again. We are officially Toward Pride, formerly Pride in the Pews, and we want to invite you to check out our website and our social media and see our new fun logo and our new fun color scheme and all of the hard work we've done around narrative and all of those things to explain exactly who we are and what we do. And so our new website is towardpride.org. Our social media handles are all at Toward Pride. We're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, we're on YouTube. And so we would love for you to check us out there. This conversation will be recorded and uploaded to YouTube if you want to go back and watch it. And we invite you to share it with someone. You'll get the Zoom recording because you registered and you were here. If there's someone in your life that you think would benefit from going back and watching the replay of this conversation, we invite you to share it with them as well. And then my final church announcement will be the same as my commercial break earlier. We really invite you to partner with us as we are entering the second season and second chapter of our work here at Toward Pride. Monthly recurring donations are greatly, greatly, greatly appreciated, whether it be $5 a month, $10 a month, whatever it is that you have to offer. We would love to partner with you in that way. And if you ain't got the money, we completely understand. Give us a follow, give us a like, give us a share on social media to make sure that people know who we are and what we are doing. And so I'm just very, very excited and grateful for the opportunity to be able to have these types of conversations. This is our first time doing a Women's Health Month panel. And so super excited about seeing what all will come out in the future. And so thank you so much for spending your Tuesday evening with us. I hope that you eat something good. I hope that you laugh from your belly. I hope that you get a great night's rest. And I look forward to a plethora of other opportunities to share space and be in community with each of you again. I hope y'all have a great night.
Thank y'all so much. This was beautiful.